There we go. So I don't forget. And then it's suddenly an hour later and I haven't hit it. One of the things I think about the myths and facts kind of document is that it gives you a nice jumping off point to really kind of drive home some of the ideas about AT service delivery and use that as the and look, here's something that says that. And look, here's
Yeah.
another thing. And so while, the presentations that I've brought it into haven't been specifically about that document, that does a nice job of adding weight to the conversation
Yep.
about other things, and talking with people about how are these myths and facts chunks, because I'm looking at them with groups as a chunk instead of the whole entire document. How do these
Mhm.
chunks propel other things you want to get across to the people you're working with? So instead of dumping all 20 something pages on them, are we
Oh, yeah.
talking about right? Are we talking about this today? And then, oh, look, here's three that really propel the conversation that people can then use. Like, I don't know how anybody else is using them. That's how I'm using them.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. And in terms of actually using them, that one piece of good news that many of you on the call might not know is that the Sites Project just put up cute little graphics for each of the myths. And you can go to the site's website and download they had some graphic artists make pictures for all of them. So it's going to make my show easier.
Who doesn't love pictures? Wait a second. I'm
and
going to do that
and
as we're talking. I'm
yeah.
going to hunt it down
Anyway.
because I think that's great. Oh, here you go. Facts and graphics. Oh my goodness. Here is the link, everybody. It's coming in the chat. Here it comes. Right.
And they're not one of the things I liked about those graphics is they're not numbered, they just say the myth or
I like
something
that
like that.
too. I like that. That's another reason why I'm reluctant to share the whole document with people because they're like, well, I can't talk about 12 yet because I haven't done four. And I'm like,
Oh golly.
I don't want people to get locked into this idea of it's a it's a hierarchy. You got to do these before you talk about these. I don't want them to think of them that way.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
Okay, well, we are totally off topic,
Yeah,
but
that's
thank
okay.
you for
That's the
that.
beauty of this is we're totally off topic and it's okay. Hi, Sarah.
Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm gonna give a quick shameless plug for Alt Shift. I am creating those same graphics or similar graphics to what Sites is doing. So if you follow us on social media, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. And I'm creating a quick graphic for each of those as well as a blurb. And the hope is that we're enticing people to kind of go like, oh, I didn't know that. I wonder what else is in the document.
Yeah.
They'll click the document and go through. And so I'm not going in order. I'm bouncing all over the place, making sure we're getting all of the buckets filled. And yeah, that's on social media. So follow us.
There you go,
Okay,
Sarah.
that,
Not only do you get a cheap plug, I'll put the link to the last one that was on your Twitter feed in the chat. There you go.
Awesome. Thank you.
I like that. I like the idea of just kind of just sharing them at will. I've been talking to people about put them in your email signature, one a week. Did you know? Do you
Love
want to know
that.
more? Then go out to the whole document. But then at least it's starting to drop some information because these are really good chunks of information. Uh, they're easy to digest. They're good. They're the right kinds of pieces of information, and I really like
and
them.
they come from the federal government, so nobody can say, "Oh yeah, you just made that up." We
And
don't do
that's
it
the
that way in
beauty
our
of it,
state.
right? I think
That's right.
that's what gives that document the most power is that these are not things that are earth-shatteringly different from any of us has been saying forever, right? But now it has this kind of perceived weight behind it, like, oh, that came from them, the legit them, the Department of Ed.
Yep.
That feels like it has a lot of weight to it, which is great. I think that's awesome. It's one of the few documents I've printed out recently, and I carry it in my backpack with me. So if anybody asks me, I have this
Well,
battered copy
Sarah,
of it.
thank you for that tip. I will tell everybody about your graphics too.
Yeah.
Everybody loves a graphic.
That
I
is,
like, I
it's
like
like
that you have the whole thing on the graphic. I just, that's very valuable. The other ones don't.
Yeah, I didn't want to be the one who's trying to like synthesize into a single statement what they were saying. And so in the post, I'm kind of summarizing the paragraph that follows the myth and the fact, but
Yeah.
I'm making sure that that myth and fact match the language from the document. So as a side note, that's one of the things that brings me joy sometimes is creating graphics. So it's kind of been a fun project.
I will
That's gotta
keep
be
that
fun.
in mind.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll
Love it.
have a way to collaborate on some
It's
things.
it's a good, because I think the amount of things you'll be able to reuse those for, Sarah, will go on and on and on. Right. I think you'll be able to repurpose those into your other pieces that you're working on too, which makes that a good valuable use of time, I think.
For sure.
Not that you needed my validation that you were spending your time properly, but I just felt like needed to say
I will always take validation from you, Mike. It's all
I
good.
apologize for that. I'm not, not trying to gauge how appropriate your time spent is. Other things people want to talk about before we jump in, or maybe we'll jump in and then you'll talk. Doesn't matter. It's the beauty of this hour. Who knows what it's going to look like?
I just want to say hi. I feel like I've missed you. It's been a hot minute since I've seen you guys. So hi.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Wow. A hi, and then the mic goes right off. She's like, I'm going to just continue.
That's all it was. It was
All right.
just that.
Fair enough.
It's April, so we are quickly approaching all of our end of year fun things. So I'm working on like an ESY spreadsheet over here, and I'm
Nice.
focused here, and I'm going to visit an inclusive playground in about 25 minutes. So I'm here for a quick minute.
Well, that sounds
then I'm-
really fun. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very
I
good.
like
And we're going to
that.
celebrate. You're almost at the end of your first year as an administrator too.
I know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
So I'm going
Mike,
to throw.
hello. Mike asked. Mike was the nicest person on email. Mike, I'm going to give you a shout out on for here it comes. Get ready. Mike emails me and he's like, do you mind if I join the conversation? And I was like, Mike, yeah, come. Now I'm expecting you to come. So yes, I'm glad you're here, Mike.
Things.
We always welcome you here, Mike. We
I
love
like that
having you.
now they list these things.
I love that you're here and that you're going to share a bunch of stuff, I bet, which is awesome. All right, well, here we are. It's our book. How are we doing with it? How we doing? Did people read?
I
Chapters
read
5 and 6?
50%.
How many percent?
50. Like me, okay, I'm going to say 65.
All right, that's fair. All right, that's fair. Gail read all. I saw a thumbs up. I read it all. That's right. I don't want to brag or anything, but I can manage my own time occasionally. I read it all. I had to catch up because I knew I wasn't going to be there last time, so I hadn't read chapter 4 either. So I read 4, 5, and 6, and then I watched the video. So what would we like to talk about? We can talk about chapter 5, which was called Laying a Foundation for Trust. Chapter 6, Developing the Emotional Intelligence of a Team. What say you? I'm up for either.
So I'm on page 109.
109. Okay, so
And
that's chapter
as I was
5.
reading this, I was like, yes, like this I want to make like my personal manifesto where it talks about like assuming positive intent when we're talking to others and entering into conversations, being solution focused. One of the thoughts that she kept reiterating, and I was like, yes, like I need to get better at this, is that being unattached to the outcome. So we're really walking in with an open mind, being willing to learn with and from others and potentially shift our own perspectives. And then being fully present and actively participating. And then that last one of speaking your truth without blame or judgment. Like as I read through all of these, I was like, yes, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Like
yes.
I need to print this and put this somewhere.
Yeah, I think this was the chapter 5 was a really good chapter. This whole idea of thinking about trust and what that looks like and that foundation and the you mentioned page 109 is where you ended up. 108, it has this whole graph of examples of norms and community agreements. I love everything about this list right here. Like Sarah said, there's so many good ideas in this one page. That really kind of, the stick with, this idea of setting a group up for success from the start, both from, like she talks about, from a procedural and a behavioral standpoint for the norms that you create with your group. And we talk occasionally. I think we hit on this most times when we seem to pull a book together, and we start talking about it. We think one of the things we go back to pretty consistently is, all of this sounds great, but the trick for a lot of this is building the trust within the group to get here, and building that foundation of it so that people are willing to make those bigger kinds of steps, and be successful. So,
I
great
like
thoughts.
how she built a team.
Say that again, Mike. I'm sorry.
I like how she built a team.
Yeah, I agree. I think her practical examples are really great. And, I talk about page 108 with that chart, which is the examples of the norms. But right before that, on the 3 pages before that, it's actually more than 3 pages, sorry. It's like 5 pages. That whole agenda that she shared of an actual meeting and what it looked like, a 2-hour meeting, 2 hour and 15 minutes, of really breaking down that meeting and how it flowed and what it looked like, and how it not only had, I think a lot of times I go into meetings with a really okay list. I was about to say really good, and then I readjusted myself. I was like, a really okay list of ideas that I would like us to get through. But sometimes I haven't internalized, or I've internalized it, but not actually written it down, the why I want to do this in that meeting and what that's leading towards. I know it's in my head rattling in there somewhere, but I don't always put it down. And so that feels like a missed opportunity. And I really liked that. Even the how, the why and the how columns of her agenda makes me rethink how I'm going to start writing that down when I pull a meeting together. Maybe not these, sorry, because we're going to be kind of looser here. But but when I do like a real legit meeting, I thought that was really interesting. That resonated with me in the chapter. That I made myself a note in the side of the page there, like, oh, I really like this. Other things from that people grabbed onto. I'm gonna just let it flow. I have questions, but I don't have to ask them. I'm just curious what you all thought.
So I have to come out as a person who just wants to get to work and let's do the work. It's hard for me sometimes to do activities like this. So, and I'm not very good at this particular task. I love the norms. I thought the list of norms was spectacular.
Yeah.
That the thing that you mentioned, Sarah, on page 109. But how do you do that? I'm frankly not willing to take a 2-hour meeting to set norms for much of anything I do, unless I know it's, a group of 20 people that were gonna work for a year together or something like that. So how do you introduce this idea of norms? What are the things that you do to make this work? Help me, please.
Help Gail, somebody. Somebody help Gail.
Okay, so Gail, if I'm being totally vulnerable and honest, when I first was like, oh, we're gonna read a chapter about this, I think my heart was with you. Like, okay. But then as I was reading it, I started to reflect on some of the teams that I've either led or some of the teams that I'm a part of, and being able to see opportunities where if we had started with what how are we going to agree to work with each other? That sense of trust and partnership, and then all of the false steps that we made along the way, not intentionally, I think could have been prevented. And so Carolyn and I both had an opportunity to work with Sharon Thomas from the instructional coaching group. And I go back to so many years ago, I asked her, I said, well, what does it look like when you start working with teams? And she said, one of the very first questions we ask them is, what are the things that are really important to you in a meeting in terms of how other people interact, how you want to interact, like what are your non-negotiables? And they did that individually, so not in a group setting. She had somebody who would go around and almost interview everyone to figure out how did they need to be treated in meetings, what did they need to get from those meetings, and then she would compile them and bring them to the group and say, okay, here are the things that we heard from this group collectively. Where do we want to go forward together? And I'll be honest, she said it, and then I was like, oh, okay, that's a great idea. And then I went about my merry way. And when I was reading this chapter, I was like, that is what she was talking about. And I think it's that old adage of sometimes you have to slow down to go fast.
You know, and I say that all the time, so I have to laugh at myself for, if you're talking about AT implementation, that's what I say. You have to plan ahead.
Mhm.
But anyway, that's an interruption. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It just, for me, this was something where I was like, I know that I need to do a better job of this. And then Gail, you hit the point on the head when you're like, I don't think I would do this for everything and every team that I'm on, but knowing, like I work with 4 to 6 people 30 hours a week, it would be a really great opportunity for us to sit down and do something like this, because the intent is that we'll be working together for years. And it's really important versus some of those teams that I think I hopped onto a conversation of you and Mike saying sometimes you do those like one-off trainings, and it's hard because it's a lot is probably not going to come. Those are opportunities where I wouldn't dive this deep into it.
But I think I would take some time. I think it's interesting. I looked at this list on 108, this procedural norms and the behavioral norms, and I realized that there are things that even in those one-off presentations or one-off meetings, or those, I'm going to even call it an introductory meeting, there are things that I will come to the group with and say, these are what you can, this is what you can expect from me here. I saw the list and it made me laugh because the first one under procedural is start and end on time. And I'm like one of those people that, well, the ending part is always hard. The beginning part, I always like, if you're here on time and I'm here on time, we should start because I want to respect your time. And I think putting those things out there, both those procedural pieces and the behavioral, I do this in my master's class, and the very first night we meet, I have a slide and it says, things you can expect from this semester, or things I expect from this semester. I forget what it says. I'm going to guess that I expect. And one of them is be nice to each other. Let other people talk, be part of the experience. And then it says in parentheses, at whatever level you're comfortable. But just putting some of that out there to them, it comes from that list there. Those are similar things to that list. And I think it does set that up. Now, those individuals, that goes to the longer side of things, like Gail was saying, like if you're working with a team for a year, these individuals are a semester. So that's 4 months, so 16 weeks. But throwing those out to them and get that kind of out there. And Sarah, I like your idea of of asking people before, what is important to you as a learner and as a team member, what's important. Now, you might get back and some people might not have anything to add. I wonder if they don't have anything to add because they've never been asked that question before, which would make me sad for them as team members and different things if they've never been asked. But I think that even just asking that is setting a tone, even if you don't get anything back.
Sarah, when she did that activity, I really liked that. And I love thinking about doing it ahead of time, which takes care of my little heart, who needs to not use too much time on this activity. But was the question more than what are the things that are really important to you? Did she clarify it all, or did she just let you come up with what was on the top of your head?
What's really important to you? One of the questions that they always talk to us about is asking people, like, what do you need to get out of this meeting in order to feel like it's a good use of your time?
Ah,
So even when I have an agenda and I walk into a meeting and I know what I want to get out of that meeting, that is a question that I often ask teams because we don't get to see them day to day in the role that I'm in. And so sometimes a lot has happened in the last 60 days or 30 days. And so when I open up a meeting with that question, it kind of lets them know that, like, this is their time as well. And a lot of times I circle back. And then some of it is, listening to what they're saying and digging a little bit deeper, asking some questions. We had a team that I had proposed this to, and they had a really awesome SLP who went from individual to individual to individual and asked them. And what ended up happening is their agenda looked differently than what we had initially planned on based on the feedback of what people wanted out of that meeting.
You need anything from me before I leave? What's up? You need something? Oh. Drink? Oh.
Sarah, I think that's really important, that idea of it. Then you look at the facilitator part to that. Is the facilitator flexible enough to say, oh, I had a big plan, go back to her pages in the book previously where it was like three pages of a whole plan, and that was great. I'm gonna toss that away, and because that's not going to resonate with my group, so let's figure out what does matter to you as you go forward. That I can't think of a better way to quickly build trust with a team than that. Be very responsive very quickly to what they're looking for, and remind them that you are there for them. All of you are there for them to make them better at what they do. As she goes further, and Sarah, here it comes, Sarah. I'm gonna spoil the chapter for you because it's past where you got. Here I come, spoiler alert.
That's all right.
As she continues to talk, one of the things that goes through the rest of this chapter is this idea of a process observer in your meeting. And I'm curious, do you all do that? Do you assign that task to someone? Do you take that role on yourself all the time? Does that role change from meeting to meeting? What does that look like? She calls that creating a structure for accountability.
Just so you know, I did get that far. I read the whole chapter. I just didn't read the next one yet.
Okay, fair. Okay, very good. And I like that you held your book up to prove that you had highlighted things. Like, look, I did it. I did the work. So what do we all think? I know personally.
Done every time, but this is phenomenal for an EAP team because everybody should be on the same paper.
Yeah, Mike, I agree. Is that you're setting this group kind of expectation of this is how we are going to work as a team. This is how we're going to work as a group, and we're going to solve something. And as they talk about the process observer, as I was reading it, I was like, I feel like there's a lot of times this chapter, I did not expect it to resonate with me as much as it did, because I felt like I was I was looking forward to the next chapter to read that one, where they talk about the emotional intelligence of a team, and I was like, oh, but I'll get there. I'll go through this one first. But this one really kind of resonated because I was like, I don't know if I do this that often. I feel like I take this role of process observer personally and never relinquish that. And I'm like, why am I doing that much work? Why am I not bringing other people in so that we can share. I view that process observer person as an opportunity to have someone sharing the responsibility for helping to facilitate the experience with the group. And I think a lot of times I take that as part of the facilitator role that I have accepted. But I don't know that I should. I don't think I should.
I think one of the things that I highlighted in this section is that to invest in the norms, participants need and want to know how they'll be held. And so at the top of the page, the heading is make the norms visible. I think
Yeah.
that process observer is going to help keep circling back to say, hey, you know, how did we do on holding up our norms today? You know,
Right.
what's one thing we think we could do better, do differently next time? And I love it's right after this section, Mike, where it talks about like reflecting on the norms.
Mhm.
But I think without that process observer and being able to have somebody that's holding us accountable to those norms, that reflection piece is going to get harder in the long run.
Yeah. Why do you think it would get harder? I agree with you, but I'm curious your why. Why do you think that gets harder?
I think in part because if you write, I'm sure we've all done this where you spend a lot of time doing something, if it's establishing goals or writing norms, your group norms, and then you finish the activity and that goes on the shelf. And then you just start going back to like business as usual. When you go back to reflect on those norms, it hasn't become a part of who you are as a team and your organizational culture. And so it's easy to be like, oh yeah, like, yep, we do those things, but you've never really taken the time in the meeting to reflect on, do we, or what does this look like?
Yes, I agree with you. I wasn't trying to be a wise guy to ask you that
No,
question,
I know.
but I thought the same thing. I'm like, it becomes easier to reflect on the norms and how we're doing if we're sharing the responsibility of being the process observer, because everyone potentially has had that moment, or others in the group have had that moment like, oh, my part of my job today is to ensure that we're moving forward constructively as a team like we agreed on. And then I think that reflection piece becomes much more dynamic and it becomes much more meaningful because I think others have a bit of a vested interest in that. More than just, yes, I'm following the list. I see it on the wall or I see it on a slide. And yes, we did all those things. I think that really
I think you
helps.
start to internalize it. It becomes a part of who you are. So it's not like the compliance of checking the box. It's the, and I would assume or maybe hypothesize that if you really write these norms together as a group and you follow them and you reflect on them and you have these conversations about what is happening in our team, the feeling that you walk out of those meetings is going to be more life-giving. I think we've all walked into meetings where it feels like it sucks all the energy out of you. And that when I read this book, I'm like, that I think is the team that we're all striving to lead and to be a part of, is the team where you're excited to come to that meeting. You know, like I'll be honest, like before this, I saw it pop up on my calendar and there's a hot second where I was like, I've got so much stuff to do that I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it today. And I was like, no, you know what? I know I'm going to come here. We're going to chat and it's going to give me more energy when I leave to carry on with the work that I need to do. And I think that's what we want from the teams that we're a part of.
No, I well said. I agree. I think you're absolutely right. Other thoughts about anything in that norms section, laying the foundation of trust? I'll give you one of the questions from her study guide. So I pulled the first study guide off the web for this book. And one of her questions is, which is a good one, what is one concrete next step you will take as a result of this chapter?
I'm not sure about that, but but I just like, the one part here she says about alternating between having an appointed process observer and having everyone play that role and inviting them to that anyone can intervene at any moment and offer reflections at the end of the meeting about what they've noticed about how the norms were upheld. And I can imagine some groups might do a little better with that than having one person be in charge of that role. You know, because there are some more dominant people, you know, I could see some groups that I've been in where, you know, those people would be the first, you know, they would be the first to volunteer for that role, and that
Yes.
may not be the best.
Correct. Julie, I imagine I just saw you envision that person's face in front of you as you did that. I just saw
Yeah,
you have that moment. Like, I
yeah,
know the person I'm thinking, and I agree. I
yeah,
think this idea of an appointed person um has to be very thoughtful at the same time. And I don't know if it's who wants to do it, because I think
right,
you're right. I
right,
think you'll get those extroverts, those strong personalities that will instantly throw their hand up and say, I'll do that today. Um, I think, and then I think part of our role as a facilitator at that point is to recognize that, and to ensure that we cycle this around so that it includes everyone. It made me think, I wrote myself a note too, the idea of how do I give a space during or after the meeting for someone who will never speak up to give their thoughts about this. I will
right,
have people who will never volunteer, who will start to visibly sweat if you offer them this role, and they will never say anything. Yet you know they have thoughts about this, and you want their opinions. And so,
right,
you know, is it a form? Is it some kind of? It's almost like a little exit ticket thing. It's, you know, it's some kind of way that you can collect that. But it made me think of those introverts from the meetings, from those team meetings. I don't know how many
yeah.
times I leave a team meeting and I'm talking to someone as I'm walking down the hall who never says a word in our meeting, and they have the
And they
most
have lots to
thoughtful
say then.
ideas ever, to where I want to
Mhm.
stop and write it down as I'm walking. So I'm like, that is great. And I have to fight myself to say, to not say to them, why don't you say it in the meeting? Because I get a sense I know exactly why they don't say it. That's just not who they are in a group of people. You start to get that. But
Right,
how do you give them a path to make sure their thoughts are heard also?
yeah.
Good point, Julie. Thank you. Anything else, or should we cycle to chapter 6? Holy cow, it's like legit. Like, we did this for 30 minutes. We're gonna do that. This meeting is running like a charm. Oh, this is fantastic. What a group.
When
Commend
I lead the
yourselves.
team, I will make time during.
Say that again, Mike.
But M. Meeting. F. Or A. Anyone. Who. Want. To say. Ooh. Something. When I lean a team, I will make time during the meeting for anyone who want to say something.
That's awesome, Mike. I think, yeah, I think that's such an important thing, Mike, to be very thoughtful about how you insert that in, and giving people space to do that. I think that's really critical there.
You know,
Thank you for
Mike, one of the things that I do is if it's a small enough group, you can't do it with 40 people, but if you've got 5 or 6, one of the norms I set is some point in the discussion, I will say, okay, so-and-so hasn't talked and so-and-so hasn't talked and so-and-so hasn't talked. What do you have to say? And then, give it some wait time so that, and we set that as a norm and we say it ahead of time. But yeah, I think that making time for people to say what they want to say. Also, people sometimes type in a Zoom meeting, I'll sometimes type in the chat.
Mhm.
And then one of the things that's fun to do is to say, so Mary, I see you typed in the chat about, what was that book? You typed in the chat about building thinking classrooms and then invite Mary or somebody else to say tell me more about that. And those are really good strategies as a facilitator, I think. I do think it's a bit different. I don't know how much time you all spend on Zoom, but I spend most of my time in Zoom meetings, and sometimes the long-term work groups. But I think that it may be some different kinds of skills we need to do that.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of the longer term groups that I'm working with, it's this hybridy mix of I see them occasionally, and then we do a lot of Zoom in between. And so there you have that relationship from the in-person keeps growing and building through the Zoom, and then you see them again. And so you have these nice opportunities to pop into different spaces with them and have those interactions, which I think are really important. But yeah, that the idea of bringing people in is so important. The people that put stuff in the chat, which is great. I think that's an underappreciated facilitator skill of having the chat and the participant list and the video open at the same time and watching all three. Because I do that constantly. I have all the windows open on my screen and then I just watch them all. Because I wait for someone's microphone to turn on and I'm like, oh, Gail, I see your microphone turn on. Do you want to add something? And then don't give them a chance to run away. Just see it right away and acknowledge that those things are important. But yeah, I think those are all tricky as we go forward for sure. That's important.
So I'm gonna throw out there too. I work with teams both virtually and in person, where if you throw it out to the room to verbally speak out, you get the quick thinkers or the people who are very vocal, and then you get a lot of people who are passive. So one of the things that I've started doing is giving choice. So giving everybody a few minutes to reflect. I'll have some type of like a Jamboard. I know it's going away, but there are alternatives. But for now, I'm going to say Jamboard. I'm doing a Padlet something. So giving people that time to process and then pulling it out and saying, hey, you can either type it here or let's have a conversation. And what I've seen, especially in the morning when you do kind of those one-off trainings, is there's a lot of interaction and people posting ideas or questions or thoughts electronically. And you pull that and you say, okay, well, let's dig into this a little bit deeper. And then pretty soon by the end of the afternoon, there's like nothing popping up electronically, but you're seeing more conversation happening between the group and a lot more ahas. So I think as adults, we like having choice too. So the more that we can build choices in for people to engage in whatever we're doing, the better.
I agree. So funny you started talking, Sarah, and I went right to the thing I wrote on my notes. This quote on in the emotional intelligence chapter is some. Again, if I'm ruining the chapter for you, I'm sorry. It's right at the beginning. So this is a quote from Viktor Frankl. It's on page 122. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And
what page is that on, Mike?
122. It's like the greatest quote I've ever seen. I love it. I'd never heard it before. I love everything about it. If I could put a bigger sticky note in my book to remind me, I would, but it's just a normal size sticky note. I just thought that was really
That
powerful. What's to say in this chapter? I wanted
is
so bad to say that. Sorry, Mike.
powerful. Two. I think that is powerful too.
Yeah, right, Mike. Wow, really good. And I like this idea that kind of sets up nicely this whole conversation about, taking the temperature of the emotional intelligence of your team, where your team's at as a bit of a collective, and where they're at as far as a group that's going to be um, successful in their working together. uh, Page 124, there's a whole list of indicators of a team's emotional intelligence, indicators of a low EI and indicators of a strong EI. Indicators of a low: team members don't look at each other when they're talking. Team members allow themselves to be distracted by tech. They interrupt each other. When someone shares an idea, the first response from another team member is a disagreement, skeptical question, or challenge. So this idea of these low EI that we've seen from teams, and then the high indicators of high. With great comments, they talk about, you might hear comments like, I've shared a lot already. I'm going to sit back and listen to others on this topic. I love that. I'd really like to hear your perspective on this. We haven't heard much from you today. That kind of goes, Gail, to what you were saying before. I see we haven't heard from so-and-so today. Do you want to add anything? That same kind of idea, which I think is really powerful. Let's see what else was in this list that grabbed me. Conversations focus on seeking solutions. Team members monitor their verbal participation. So people very aware of their own participation. Like, for example, I'm very aware right now that I'm talking a lot, and I'm going to start to not talk, but we're already too far into it. I don't know that I will. That is always my issue, is monitoring my verbal participation. I think that the list was really, really great. And I'm trying to think if I found anything else on the list that I really liked. Anybody else find something in this chapter that really struck you? What was your post-it note moment, your highlight moment in this chapter?
I liked on page 128 about the uprooting behaviors, the unspoken norms or behaviors that a group has unknowingly condoned. And then later, 2 paragraphs down there towards the end, it talks about venting, although, the people claim that they need to vent. Much unhealthy behavior is justified as necessary venting. There's no evidence that venting is productive. In fact, social psychologists and neurologists have found that venting makes people feel hopeless. It strengthens us versus them mentalities, and it solidifies neural pathways that make us depressed. And, there's, constantly, I know in, a lot of work situations, there's venting, especially I know where we are, venting all the time goes on. And it's, it's hard to circumvent that and get around that and get people out of that habit. And so that really kind of hit home for me there.
Yeah, Julie, I agree. I think it may be hard to kind of uproot all opportunities for venting. I think for some people that is their preferred method of participation, but can we redirect them in some way? Like, I hear what you're saying. What's one step we could take to make some movement in a positive way in this area?
Right. And she does go on to talk about how, about redirecting that. It's not
Yeah.
that you can't, it's not to stop complaining about something. It's to think about, what you can do about it, changing your perspective on it. So,
Right underneath that paragraph, Julie, is my highlight to myself with a big star in
uh-huh.
in the side. It says a leader's role in developing a team's emotional intelligence is to guide energy and emotion. It's my big takeaway from that paragraph as I read it.
Julie, I starred shift at the sentence that says the group needs to recognize and acknowledge the negative impact it is having on the group for it to self-regulate and shift its behavior toward problem solving. Shift towards problem solving. I started. We're on the same page.
We're starring it, right? I hear you, right? But it's one of those things. And how often have we been in a meeting or a space where it has taken a negative spiral and no
Very
one pulls
often.
us out of the
Yeah.
spiral, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So is that an example of a team with a low emotional intelligence because there's not a space where they can say, hey, can we look at this from another angle? Can we shift how we're observing this? Can we take this and think about positive steps to take it in a different direction? Because Julie, like you said, that negativeness, that negativity, sorry, negativeness, I don't
Yeah.
know the word negativity, starts to become self-fulfilling. It just keeps going. And it's like, wow, I
Right.
feel really crappy right now in our meeting.
Yeah.
Like it's gone to a point that I can't even drag myself out of it. And it's like, but and those, and I'm thinking of a meeting. I'm thinking of a person right now too. Where I was in this meeting and I felt like, wow, we're never going to get out of this tailspin we're in. And I'm just praying for the top of the hour so it could be done. Maybe start fresh again next time.
Right.
Because you could tell this meeting I was in had reached a point of this was now officially a waste of everyone's time. Right? Like that moment, there was nothing good was going to come from that.
Mhm.
And then
So
I
my-
realized, I look
Yeah.
at that list of positive and negative behaviors. I think back to a meeting that I was in, this meeting, and I realized I started doing all of these other things. I opened up another window on my computer and I did my email.
Mhm.
I turned my camera off. I did all of those things. I was like, man, I don't think I really want to be here right now. So I'm going to be part of the problem, I guess, at this point. And I'm going to check out.
So Mike,
Yeah.
can you imagine what, if you were the leader of that meeting, what you could have done to change that?
Yeah, I do. I think Gail, and it's funny because the leader of this meeting is someone I work with. And so I've had opportunities to talk to this person after that. One of them, and now I'm recording this too, but that's okay. One of the things that, I was brought back to me was, hey, I noticed that your camera went off. And I was like, yeah, I had something on the side. I didn't want to be distracting visually. So I turned my camera off. And then this person said, but then you never turned it back on. And then I said to him, can I be frank? I didn't feel like we were in a very productive spot right there. And so I didn't want to continue to feed the negativity of the meeting. I think what I would have done, Gail, to answer your question, is a simple pump the brakes for a second and say, I think we've gotten to a point where we've lost focus of what it is we were trying to resolve in this meeting or what we were hoping to accomplish. And I understand people needed to get that out, but now can we shift that and say, what are things we can do positively that will change that instead of us just spiraling down? I found I've become very, very blunt lately, Gail. I've gotten older and I've gotten less aggravate. I have a lower tolerance for aggravation. So I have a higher chance that I will say exactly what I'm thinking at any moment in a meeting.
Yes.
And I don't know that that's always a good thing, but I think that's where it's at. But in a productive way, I think that's really important to think about too. Is how do you do that productively?
Well, and productively and kindly.
And kindly,
mean,
yeah, I agree. Kindly
Mhm.
is another example of that too. You're right. Because and the conversation I had with this person who was leading this meeting, Julie, I think you have background, something bleeding through from your background.
Yep.
Your sound.
People talking back there, yeah.
People, they have a lot of nerve. But I think what was interesting, Gail, is because I do work with this person and I did say it very honestly to them what my issue was with the meeting. I got to tell you, the next meeting we had was really very good. And so I take that as a positive. And I said to that person afterwards, I shot them an email after we were done. I was like, hey, that was a really good meeting. I felt like that was really productive. Thank you. I wrote, thank you for facilitating that. It was good.
And you left your camera on.
And I had my camera on the whole time. Exactly. And so I thought she actually wrote back. This person wrote back and said, oh, I saw your camera was on. And I said, yeah, my camera was on because I thought we were doing a lot. We got through what we had hoped to do, and we got through it in the right way. And it felt very productive as we went forward. I felt like I could revisit that group and do some good work after that, as opposed to the previous time where I was like, kind of like Sarah. Sarah said before this, she's like, I have a lot of stuff I could do, or I could go here. But if we didn't have a change in that second meeting, I would have magically found things to do every time we had a meeting after that. Like, oh, I'm really packed. I can't participate. So.
Mike, and I think like what you're highlighting though, Gail, when you ask what would you do differently as a facilitator, is like we have to give ourselves permission too to recognize sometimes like this meeting is off the rails, or like did something else happen? I've worked with a site, we had a meeting and they were always really great and they were very inattentive. During this meeting, I said, hey, what's going on today, guys? How's it going? And they said, oh, we just had a student who passed away this week. And so we've got our minds in a lot of different places. And so I could have totally like just kept going, like, this is the plan I came here with.
Mm-hmm.
But instead we really shifted to be responsive of, okay, so how are things going? What are you guys doing? Is there anything we can do to support you? And they were afterwards very grateful for having that opportunity to just have some space together as a team to be able to process through some of that. And I think it's always like that recognition of like, okay, if I acknowledge that this is not going the direction it's going, like, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? If I'm saying like, hey, I'm not doing a great job of facilitating this meeting, but I think the times that I have acknowledged it, it's brought something to the table that I didn't know was out there.
Wouldn't you rather just put that out there, Sarah, and everybody, by the way? Wouldn't you just rather put that out there? I feel like, again, that idea of as a facilitator, if I see it in my mind as I'm facilitating and doing everything else, if I'm recognizing it's not going well, someone else has got to be recognizing it's not going well. And why not just call it out and say, what's happening? What's happening today? That brings me back to that idea of the process observer.
Mm-hmm.
If that person is not you and it's someone else, that gives you another person to be like, hey, by the way, here's our list of norms and our expectations. And we're doing some today, but not all. And I want to point that out to the group. And I think that kind of that role of that person can be really powerful then at that point, especially when it's kind of spins out of control. Because you might be fighting so hard as the facilitator to get it back that you might actually make it worse somehow. You're not getting it back at all. You're just helping it spin. You're just making it somehow a more miserable.
To me, part of that is comfort in your own role.
Yeah.
If it's the first meeting you facilitated with that group and it was that way, it might not have been as easy to stop and call attention to what was going on. And I think people who are new at facilitating meetings, it's harder to say, I'm not sure this is going very well when it's, when you're new at it, but it's so important and it's so powerful. I really, really think it's very powerful to do that kind of stuff.
I think it's interesting, Gail.
About my 7th grade meeting, we didn't get anything done because the 2 regular education teachers were just gossiping, and that hurt my feelings.
Mike, yes, that was on the list. Gossiping was on one of the lists, and you're right. I mean, that's not productive at all. And then there it is, the individual who you're there speaking about is now lost interest in their own meeting because there's nothing in here that's being productive. And then if the facilitator is not strong enough to be able to say, you know, can we table that? This is not the space for that. Can we refocus our energies back? If your person's not comfortable doing that, then yeah, what are we getting? We're getting a lot of meetings that are just not beneficial in any way. Gail, what you said made me think of something. This idea of it's easier to say those kinds of things with a group that you've been with for a while. Like, hey, I don't think this is going well today. I'm going to look at it from the different perspective. What if it is the first meeting
Yeah.
and you as the facilitator recognize it's not going well and you call it out in that first meeting because you're comfortable enough that you can get it back at some point? Is that powerful? Does that build trust quicker with the team? Does that build the team quicker because you were acknowledging it right up front? Or is that detrimental to you as the facilitator?
Can you tell me a story about sometime when that happened?
No,
You can say
it's
no.
all just in my head as a what if right
Oh.
now. Yeah, it's not even, yeah, I
Okay.
wish I could say, oh, I blew it one time right from the start. I'm sure I have, but I can't think of it right now.
I actually can tell you a story.
Tell me a story.
Similar to Sarah's, when this is old lady stuff, it was a long time ago, but when Katrina destroyed the New Orleans area, I was invited down to help rebuild an AT team for a region that was right in New Orleans. And I tried to, I knew how to do AT teams. I'd done it a million times. It was no big deal. I tried to start that meeting the way I always started it. And they couldn't even, they just stared at me. It was awful. And I finally said, okay, something's going on here because you won't even tell me your names. It was really terrible. And somebody said, this is the second anniversary of Katrina today. And so I was smart enough in those days to say, okay, I need to hear your stories. I wasn't here. I don't know what it was about. Tell me your stories. And after that, it was such an interesting, I don't know, Sarah, if you had the same experience, but it was such an interesting and powerful group over time, because they'd had a chance to bond with me a little bit and to bond with each other about all the things that had happened to them.
Yeah. And they had a chance to be acknowledged. Their story was acknowledged somehow. It was important
Right,
to
but
the
if I
group.
hadn't done that, I came back several times to New Orleans and I would have thought they were just an unresponsive group and didn't really want to do it,
Right.
which was not the case.
Yeah, right.
So I think, Gail, you answered your own question right there. Like a team that you're unfamiliar with, is it okay to kind of say, hey, what's going on? And I think the answer is yes, in a respectful and responsive
Right.
way. You like, hey, you guys are horrible. Just,
You're not
acknowledging
supposed to
like,
say that. Say that. Wait, what? You
yeah,
guys
like write
are
yourself a
horrible.
sticky note. Don't call anyone horrible. But I think and that's where I go back to, even if you have that brief, Mike, you mentioned, hey, this is what you can expect from me as your facilitator. This is kind of my expectation for you, or for this group as a learner. And Mike, that's something that you have always, since I've known you 5-ish, 6 years now, have always kind of done, is set that tone in the beginning. Then it gives you that easier ability to circle back and say, hey, something's not right here. Let's just have a conversation.
Right. Yeah, I think it's good. Okay. So don't tell them they're bad. Okay. All
Yep.
right. Well, I got good tips from today. Don't tell people they're bad. Okay. I got that. That's awesome. All right,
You
everybody.
have never done that.
I would
can't believe-
never. I would never. I'm a glass half full guy, Gail. I'll find something good in anybody. I'll dig around. I'll find you're good.
I watch you do that. You are
I'll
a
find
master.
it. Well, everyone, we did it. It's 3 minutes after the hour.
Being new, I will be scared to say anything.
Mike, I'm giving you a free pass to continue to keep coming back and say whatever you want. I like that you're adding that in. All right, we are scheduled to see each other again on April 22nd. So two Mondays from today, not next Monday, but the following Monday. Chapters 7 and 8, cultivating healthy communication, and so that you can get excited, making good decisions.
Ooh.
Love it. I didn't even know that's
I-
what the chapter was. Now I love
I'm
it even
in
more.
awe of anybody that will write a chapter like that.
Oh my, I can't wait to read that now. Making good decisions. All right, there it is, everybody. Those are our 2 chapters coming up. So we'll see everybody on the 22nd, and we will continue on this discussion. Thanks for sharing today. Appreciate it. It was good. I was so glad to see everybody.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
one, everyone.
Have a good rest of the day,
Thanks.
everybody.
Bye.